There is a reason you didn't scroll past this. There is a reason your eyes stopped here. Your spirit paused and something inside you whispered, "Wait, this is for me." This is not coincidence. This is not algorithm. This is not random timing. This is a summons. And deep down, you already feel it. You've been sensing something lately, haven't you? A shift you couldn't explain. A tension in the air that doesn't match your outer circumstances. Moments where you felt watched, not in fear, but in awareness. Moments where your silence felt louder than words. Moments where you walked away from situations thinking, "Why does this feel different now?" Because it is different now. Because something has changed, not around you, but within you. And heaven had been watching. Archangel Michael steps forward in this moment. Not gently, but with authority. Not to comfort your confusion, but to interrupt it. His voice does not whisper today. It echoes with clarity. You have been too quiet for too long. You thought your silence was strength. You thought your patience was wisdom. You thought your humility was protection. But what if I told you they saw it differently? What if I told you that while you were choosing peace, they were studying your restraint? While you were extending grace, they were testing your limits. While you were holding back, they were moving forward, thinking you would never rise. Let that settle. Because this is where everything begins to shift. This message didn't find you because you were searching for it. It found you because something in the spiritual realm has reached a tipping point. You may not have seen it with your physical eyes, but your spirit has been trying to alert you for weeks, maybe even months. A subtle discomfort when certain people spoke to you. That quiet intuition telling you something isn't right here. That feeling of being underestimated, overlooked, almost dismissed. You brushed it off. You told yourself you were overthinking. You told yourself to stay humble. You told yourself to keep the peace. But heaven says that was never weakness. That was preparation. Preparation for this exact moment. Because what's about to happen next requires you awake. Not heavy aware. Not spiritually passive. Not emotionally asleep. And wait. There are moments in life when everything seems normal on the surface, but beneath it, something powerful is shifting into place. This is one of those moments. A line has been drawn, not by you but by heaven. And once heaven draws a line, everything on one side begins to separate from everything on the other. You may start noticing it immediately after this. Conversations will feel different. Energies will shift. People will reveal themselves, not through dramatic actions, but through subtle truths you can no longer ignore. Because now you've been called to see. Archangel Michael stands as a guardian, but today, he stands as a revealer. He is not here to warn you about danger coming. He is here to show you what has already been happening. And more importantly, who you have been in the middle of it. You have not been weak. You have been restrained power. You have not been overlooked. You have been observed. You have not been forgotten. You have been positioned. And now the positioning phase is ending. The rising begins. But here's the truth you must accept before anything else unfolds. Once you see clearly, you cannot go back to pretending you don't. Once you feel the shift, you cannot return to who you were before this moment. Because this message is not just information. It is activation. Something inside you is about to wake up, and when it does, everything around you will have to respond. So don't ignore this feeling. Don't dismiss this moment. Don't shrink back into comfort. Because you were not brought here to stay the same. You were brought here to remember who you are and what God placed inside you. And this is only the beginning. Type "I am awakening" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 2026 is now activated around your spirit. There is something you need to understand now, something that may shift the way you see your past completely. What you called humility, they called hesitation. What you believed was patience, they interpreted as permission. And what you thought was strength under control, they labeled as weakness they could take advantage of. You see, you chose silence in moments where others would have reacted. You chose grace when others expected retaliation. You chose to step back instead of stepping into conflict. And in your spirit, you believed you were doing the right thing. You believed you were honoring peace, protecting your energy, and walking in alignment with something higher than ego. But while you were mastering restraint, they were misreading your stillness. They watched you absorb disrespect without confrontation, and instead of recognizing your discipline, they assumed you lacked power. They saw you forgive quickly, and instead of honoring your heart, they concluded you would tolerate anything. They noticed how you avoided unnecessary drama, and instead of respecting your wisdom, they believed you could be controlled, bypassed, and underestimated. This is where the misjudgment began. And it did not happen all at once. It was subtle. It grew over time. Small moments where someone tested a boundary and you let it pass. Small comments that crossed a line and you chose not to address. Small shifts in tone, behavior, and respect that you noticed, but convinced yourself were not worth reacting to. You told yourself, "It's not that serious." You told yourself, "I'll just let it go." You told yourself, "Peace is more important." And while those words came from a place of maturity, they also created a silent pattern. A pattern others began to rely on. A pattern where your silence became expected. Where your forgiveness became predictable. Where your presence became something they felt they could manage without consequence. But here is what they failed to understand. Your silence was never weakness. It was restraint. Your kindness was never ignorance. It was awareness choosing peace. Your humility was never lack of power. It was power under control. And now, that control is shifting. Because there comes a moment where heaven steps in and says, enough. Enough misinterpretation. Enough quiet endurance. Enough allowing people to write the meaning of your character to fit their comfort. That moment is now. Archangel Michael reveals that the misjudgment of your spirit was not just a personal misunderstanding. It became a spiritual imbalance. Because when people consistently misread your nature, they begin to treat you according to their illusion, not your truth. And over time, that illusion creates an environment where disrespect feels normal, where boundaries are ignored, and where your value is quietly diminished. You felt this, even if you could not fully explain it. You felt the shift in how people spoke to you. You noticed the difference in how they responded to your presence. You sensed that something about their energy toward you had changed. But you stayed consistent. You stayed grounded. You stayed patient. And that is why this moment carries so much weight. Because now, the same humility they misjudged is about to reveal a different side. Not a different version of you, but a deeper layer they never took the time to understand. There is a reason the lion remains calm until it is necessary to rise. And when it rises, it does not ask for permission. It does not explain its power. It does not justify its presence. It simply reveals what was always there. That is what is happening within you now. The restraint is lifting, not in chaos, but in clarity. Not in anger, but in authority. You are beginning to see that protecting your peace does not mean abandoning your voice. That walking in grace does not require accepting disrespect. That being humble does not mean being invisible. This is the correction. This is where the misunderstanding ends. And here is the truth that may be difficult, but necessary. Some people will not adjust easily to this shift, because they became comfortable with the version of you that's staying quiet. They built expectations around your silence. They relied on your patience to maintain their behavior. So when you begin to move differently, speak differently, and carry yourself with a new level of clarity, it will feel unfamiliar to them. It may even feel threatening. Not because you changed into something new, but because they are finally seeing what they ignored. And that is where the tension will come from. But you must not shrink back. You must not return to old patterns just to keep others comfortable. Because what is rising in you now is not reaction. It is revelation. It is the understanding that your humility was never meant to be a hiding place. It was meant to be a foundation for strength, a foundation for discernment, a foundation for authority. And now, that authority is being activated. The misjudgment is ending. The illusion is breaking. And the same people who once overlooked you will begin to feel the shift they never prepared for. Because they thought they understood you, but they only saw what you allowed. Now they are about to witness what God placed inside you. Type "I am no longer misunderstood" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 2727 is now activated. There is something you have felt, but never fully named. Something subtle, almost invisible, yet persistent enough that it never completely left your awareness. It was not loud. It was not obvious. But it was there. A quiet sense that you were being observed more than supported, studied more than understood, measured more than appreciated. And now, Archangel Michael reveals what your spirit has been trying to tell you all along. You were not imagining it. There have been eyes on you. Not the kind that celebrate your growth, but the kind that monitor it. Not the kind that cheer for your progress, but the kind that question it. These observers did not always show themselves openly. They smiled when necessary. They spoke kindly when it benefited them. They played their roles well enough to avoid suspicion. But beneath that surface there was something else operating. Comparison. Calculation. Wide judgment. They watched how you moved. They paid attention to your decisions. They noticed when you pulled back, when you spoke up, when you remained silent. They tracked your energy, your patterns, your responses. Not because they were inspired by you, but because they were trying to understand you in order to define you within their own limited perception. And here is what makes this deeper. Many of them were close enough to you to matter. They were not strangers passing by. They were voices you recognized, presences you were familiar with, people who had access to your space, your thoughts, your life in ways that outsiders did not. That is why the awareness you felt was confusing, because part of you trusted them, while another part of you questioned something you could not explain. You dismissed it. You told yourself you were overthinking. You told yourself not to assume the worst. You told yourself to stay grounded and not let your mind create problems that might not exist. But your spirit was not creating anything. It was detecting. Because there is a difference between paranoia and perception. And what you were experiencing was not fear. It was discernment quietly rising beneath your surface, waiting for the right moment to become clear. That moment has arrived. Archangel Michael makes it known that these hidden observers were not just watching you randomly. There was a reason behind their attention. Something about your presence unsettled them. Something about your growth disrupted their comfort. Something about your silence made them curious, even uneasy. because you were not predictable. You did not react the way they expected. You did not engage in the same patterns they were used to. You did not expose everything about yourself in ways that made you easy to define or control, and that made them study you more closely. They tried to understand your strength by observing your restraint. They tried to measure your limits by watching your patience. They tried to interpret your silence as a lack of awareness. But what they did not realize is that while they were watching you, something greater was watching them. Heaven was taking note. Every assumption, every quiet judgment, every moment where your character was analyzed without being understood, nothing went unseen. And now, that unseen observation is becoming revealed truth. This is why things may start to feel different after this moment. Because once awareness enters your spirit, you begin to notice what you once overlooked. Conversations that once felt normal may now feel layered. Interactions that once seemed harmless may now carry a different tone. You may begin to sense intentions more clearly, not because people subtly changed, but because your perception has sharpened. This is not meant to make you fearful. It is meant to make you aware, because awareness changes how you move. You no longer speak from assumption. You no longer engage without discernment. You no longer give access without alignment. This is the shift. The hidden observers will not all reveal themselves openly. Some will remain quiet, continuing to watch from a distance. Others may begin to act differently as they sense your change. Their energy may shift. Their words may carry a different weight. Their presence may feel less aligned than it once did. And you will notice, not because you are searching for it, but because your spirit is no longer asleep to it. This is where your authority begins to take form. Because once you see clearly, you no longer need validation from those who misunderstood you. You no longer need to explain yourself to those who formed conclusions without seeking truth. You no longer need to adjust your presence to fit into their limited understanding. You simply move with clarity, and clarity changes everything. The watchers may continue to watch, but now they are no longer observing someone unaware. They are witnessing someone awakened, someone who understands their value, someone who recognizes their environment, someone who no longer operates from unconscious patterns, but from intentional awareness. This is what shifts the dynamic. Because when awareness rises, power follows. And when power follows, everything that once operated in quiet observation must now respond to visible presence. You are no longer being studied in silence. You are being revealed in truth. Type ISE clearly now in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 3333 is now activated. As this revelation settles into your spirit, understand this: every time truth like this reaches you, it is not just for you. It is meant to reach countless others who are still walking in confusion, still silencing their discernment, still questioning what their spirit is trying to show them. This is how light spreads, one awakened soul at a time, becoming a beacon for another. The word declares, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy," and right now, your support becomes a seed that carries clarity into someone else's darkness. I feel led to say this plainly: I am stepping into this moment not just to receive, but to release what God has placed in my hands. When you give through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description or QR code, you are not funding a message. You are fueling a movement of awakening that heaven is actively using. This is a prophetic act, a moment where your obedience aligns with divine timing. And as you release your seed, may it return to you multiplied in peace, clarity, and open doors. Act now and become part of what God is unfolding. There comes a moment in every spiritual journey when silence is no longer protection, It becomes permission. A moment when patience, no matter how pure, begins to be stretched beyond its divine intention. A moment when heaven itself steps in and declares that what has been tolerated can no longer continue. This is that moment for you. You have endured more than most people realize. You have held your composure in situations that could have easily pulled you into conflict. You have carried yourself with restraint even when you were misunderstood, overlooked, and quietly disrespected. You told yourself it was temporary. You convinced yourself that time would correct what felt off. You believed that if you stayed consistent, if you stayed grounded, things would eventually align. But what you did not see was that your endurance was being extended beyond its purpose. Archangel Michael steps forward now with a message that carries both authority and finality. He reveals that there is a point where divine patience reaches its boundary, not because you failed, but because the environment around you refused to honor what you carried. Heaven does not allow a balance to exist indefinitely. When respect is consistently replaced with assumption, when your presence is repeatedly undervalued, when your silence is used as a space for others to overstep, something shifts in the spiritual realm. That shift has now occurred. This is the breaking point. Not a collapse, but a correction. For a long time, heaven allowed observation. It allowed people to reveal their nature through how they treated you. It allowed patterns to form so they could be clearly seen. It allowed time to pass so there would be no confusion about what was intentional and what was accidental. And through all of that, you remain steady. But now, the observation phase has ended. What you are entering is intervention. This is not about reacting emotionally. This is about alignment being restored. Because there is a difference between being patient and being placed in environments that no longer reflect your value. There is a difference between giving grace and allowing cycles to continue unchecked. And heaven has now drawn that line for you. You may feel this shift already. It may feel like a sudden clarity, a quiet firmness rising within you. Situations that you once tolerated now feel different. Conversations that you once brushed off now linger in your awareness. There is a subtle but undeniable change in how you process what is happening around you. That is not you becoming reactive. That is you becoming aligned. Because when heaven says enough, something inside you begins to respond. Archangel Michael reveals that this moment was not triggered by one single event. It was the accumulation of many moments. Small dismissals, quiet misjudgments, repeated assumptions that slowly built into a pattern. And while you continued to move with integrity, others continued to move with misunderstanding. That imbalance could not continue forever. So heaven intervened. And when heaven intervenes, it does not always look dramatic. It often begins internally. A shift in your awareness, a strengthening of your boundaries, a refusal to continue engaging in the same way you once did. It may not be loud, but it is undeniable. This is where many people become uncomfortable, because they were accustomed to the version of you that absorbed everything without response. They became familiar with your consistency in maintaining peace, even when that peace required your silence. But now, something has changed. Not in who you are, but in how you carry what you are. You are no longer available for the same patterns. And that will be felt. Some will sense it immediately. They may not understand it, but they will feel the difference. Others may try to continue as if nothing has changed, only to realize that the dynamic no longer responds the same way. The space they once occupied in your life may begin to shift, not because you are pushing them away, but because alignment is redefining what belongs. This is the breaking point. Not the end of your peace, but the end of misplaced tolerance. Not the loss of your humility, but the restoration of your authority. Because humility was never meant to silence your truth. It was meant to anchor it. And now, your truth is rising. Archangel Michael stands as a witness to this transition. He does not come to create conflict, but to establish order, to ensure that what has been misread is now corrected, to ensure that what has been overlooked is now recognized, and to ensure that you no longer remain in spaces that require you to diminish who you are in order to maintain comfort for others. This is where your path begins to separate from what no longer aligns. And separation is not punishment. It is precision. It is the process of removing what does not reflect your growth so that what does can fully emerge. It is the adjustment that allows your environment to match your evolution. And while it may feel unfamiliar at first, it is necessary. Because what is coming next requires you to stand fully in who you are. Not partially, not conditionally, not quietly, fully. This is the moment heaven marked, the moment where everything begins to shift from endurance to elevation, the moment where your presence is no longer something that can be overlooked, but something that must be acknowledged, because enough has been declared, and once that declaration is made, nothing returns to what it was before. Type "I accept divine alignment" in the comments if you receive this message. Lesson code 4444 is now activated. There is something within you that has remained quiet for a long time. Not absent, not weak, not forgotten. Just waiting. Waiting beneath your patience, beneath your restraint, beneath the version of yourself that learned how to survive by staying composed. And now, that hidden strength is no longer waiting. It is awakening. You may have felt the first signs of it already. A shift in your posture. A change in how you respond internally, even if you have not yet expressed it outwardly. Situations that once drained you now trigger something different. Not frustration, but clarity. Not confusion, but recognition. You are beginning to see things as they are, not as you once tried to interpret them. That is the lion stirring within you. Archangel Michael reveals that this was always placed inside you. This strength, this authority, this presence that does not need to prove itself, but cannot be ignored when it rises. It was never given to you to dominate others or to create conflict. It was given to you to stand in truth without hesitation, to hold your ground without apology, to exist in your full identity without shrinking for the comfort of those who misunderstood you. But for a long time, this part of you remained covered, not because it was taken from you, but because your journey required you to develop something first. Discipline, awareness, emotional control. You had to learn the difference between reaction and response. You had to understand what it meant to carry strength without misusing it. You had to become grounded enough that when this power awakened, it would not lead you into chaos, but into alignment. And now, the preparation is complete. The lion does not awaken in panic. It does not rise in confusion. It rises with certainty. And that certainty is beginning to fill you now. You may notice that you no longer feel the need to explain yourself the way you once did. You no longer feel compelled to justify your decisions to people who have already formed their own conclusions. There is a quiet confidence forming, one that does not rely on validation, one that does not require agreement, one that simply exists because it knows. That knowing is your power. And it is not aggressive. It is not loud for the sake of being heard. It is steady. It is controlled. It is undeniable. This is what they never expected. They expected you to remain in the version of yourself that absorbed everything without shifting. They assumed that your silence would continue indefinitely. They believed that your humility meant you would never step into your full presence. But they did not understand that humility was never meant to suppress you. It was meant to prepare you. Because when humility is paired with awakening, it becomes authority. And authority changes everything. The lion within you is not here to attack. It is here to establish boundaries that are no longer negotiable, to establish standards that are no longer flexible, to establish a presence that does not adjust itself to fit into spaces that no longer align. This is where your energy begins to shift outwardly. People will feel it before you say anything. They will sense that something about you is different. The way you carry yourself, the way you respond, even the way you remain silent will no longer feel the same. There will be weight behind your presence, not heavy in a negative way, but substantial in a way that cannot be dismissed. This is what happens when you stop operating from survival and begin operating from identity. Because the lion does not ask where it belongs. It knows. And that knowing removes hesitation. Archangel Michael stands as a witness to this transformation, not to control it, but to confirm it. He reveals that what is rising in you is not something new. It is something ancient within your spirit, something placed there with intention long before you ever encountered the situations that required your patience. Now, those same situations are becoming the catalyst for your emergence. You are no longer navigating from uncertainty. You are moving from awareness. You are no longer adjusting yourself to maintain peace at any cost. You are defining peace in a way that includes your own alignment. This is the difference. And with that difference comes a responsibility. Because once the lion awakens, it cannot return to sleep. You cannot unsee what you now recognize. You cannot unknow what has become clear. You cannot return to the version of yourself that tolerated what you now understand. This is not a loss. It is an evolution. And like any true evolution, it requires you to step fully into it. Not partially. Not when it is convenient. Not only when it feels safe. Fully. There will be moments where this new awareness challenges you. Moments where you may feel the pull to go back to old patterns because they are familiar. Moments where you may question whether it is easier to remain as you were. But you must remember this. You were not meant to stay where you were understood incorrectly. You were meant to rise into who you truly are. And that rising is happening now. The lion within you is not a reaction to what others have done. It is a revelation of what God placed inside you from the beginning. It is the alignment of your inner truth with your outward presence. It is the moment where your identity and your expression finally meet. And once they meet, everything changes. Because now, you are no longer just aware of your strength. You are embodying it. Type "the lion within me has awakened" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 5555 is now activated. Something has changed, and you cannot ignore it anymore. It may not have happened all at once. It may not have come with a dramatic moment or a clear announcement. But you feel it. In your thoughts. In your reactions. In the way certain environments no longer sit the same within your spirit. What once felt normal now feels distant. What once felt comfortable now feels misaligned. And what once felt familiar now feels like something you have outgrown. This is the shift. And it is not external first. It is internal. Archangel Michael reveals that what you are experiencing is a recalibration of your spiritual awareness. Your sensitivity to truth has increased. Your tolerance for misalignment has decreased. And your ability to discern what belongs and what does not has become sharper than it has ever been before. This is why everything feels different. Because you are no longer seeing through the same lens. Before, you interpreted situations through patience. You gave people the benefit of the doubt. You allowed time to explain what did not immediately make sense. And while that served a purpose in your growth, it also delayed your recognition of what was consistently present. And now, that delay is gone. You are seeing patterns as they are, not as you hoped they would be. You are recognizing energy without needing confirmation. You are feeling the truth of a situation before it is spoken. And that awareness is changing how you move, even if you have not fully adjusted your actions yet. This is the space between realization and response. And it can feel unfamiliar, because part of you is still processing the difference. You are noticing things you once overlooked, and at the same time, you are deciding what to do with that awareness. This is why you may feel a quiet tension within yourself. Not confusion, but transition. You are no longer who you were, but you are still stepping into who you are becoming. That in-between space is where the shift becomes undeniable. You may find yourself pulling back from conversations that once held your attention. You may feel less inclined to explain yourself. You may notice that certain people's presence affects you differently than it once did. Not because they change suddenly, but because your awareness of them has deepened. This is not disconnection without reason. This is alignment taking form. Because when your spirit evolves, your environment must adjust. And when your environment does not adjust, your relationship to it begins to change. That is what you are feeling now. Archangel Michael makes it clear that the shift is not something to resist. It is something to understand. Because many people, when they first experience this level of awareness, attempt to return to what is familiar. They try to convince themselves that nothing has really changed. They try to maintain connections in the same way, even when it no longer feels natural. But that creates conflict within. Because once your spirit recognizes misalignment, it cannot fully relax in it again. This is why you may feel a sense of distance even when nothing outward has been said. Why certain interactions feel heavier, even if the words are the same. Why your energy no longer flows the way it once did in spaces that used to feel easy. It is not your imagination. It is your elevation. And elevation always brings separation, even before it becomes visible. You are being lifted into a different level of awareness, and that level does not operate the same way as before. It requires clarity. It requires intention. It requires you to move with understanding instead of assumption. This is where your growth becomes real. Because awareness alone is not enough. It must be followed by alignment. And alignment requires decisions. You may not need to make them all at once. You may not need to confront everything immediately. But you will no longer be able to ignore what you now see. The shift will continue to guide you, whether you resist it or accept it. Because this is not a temporary feeling. This is a permanent adjustment. Archangel Michael stands as a guide through this transition, reminding you that what feels different is not meant to destabilize you. It is meant to ground you at a higher level, to bring you into a space where your inner truth and your outer experience begin to match. This is why your intuition feels stronger. This is why your patience feels different. This is why your silence now carries awareness instead of uncertainty. Everything is aligning. And as it aligns, everything that does not match that alignment will become more visible. Not to overwhelm you, but to prepare you. Because what comes next requires you to trust what you feel without needing constant validation. It requires you to move with clarity even when others do not understand your decisions. It requires you to honor your awareness, even when it creates distance between you and what once felt close. This is the shift. And once you fully step into it, you will realize something important. Nothing around you changed without reason. and change it because you did. Type "I trust the shift" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 6666 is now activated. There is a moment that comes after awareness settles in, after the shift becomes undeniable, after the line within you awakens and your perception sharpens. It is the moment where truth no longer stays internal. It begins to meet what has been operating around you. And when truth meets deception, something must give. That moment is approaching. You may have already felt the early signs of it. A subtle tension in conversations. A change in how certain people respond to you. A quiet resistance that was not there before. It is not always loud, and it is not always direct, but it is present. Because when you begin to see clearly, you begin to carry yourself differently. And when you carry yourself differently, those who relied on your previous silence begin to feel it. Archangel Michael reveals that this is not a confrontation you need to create. It is one that unfolds naturally when alignment replaces accommodation. You are no longer adjusting yourself to maintain a version of peace that required your silence. You are no longer participating in dynamics that depend on your lack of response. And that alone shifts everything. Because deception survives in comfort. It continues when it is not challenged, when it is not exposed, when it is allowed to exist without resistance. But truth does not need to fight deception aggressively. It simply needs to stand. And when it stands, deception begins to lose its ground. This is where the confrontation begins. Not necessarily through arguments or direct conflict, but through presence. Through the way you now respond, or choose not to respond. Through the way you no longer engage in the same patterns. Through the way your energy no longer supports what is misaligned. People will feel it. Those who misunderstood you will begin to notice that their assumptions no longer hold the same weight. Those who relied on your silence will begin to realize that your presence now carries something different. And those who operated comfortably within the old dynamic will begin to sense that the dynamic itself is changing. This can create discomfort. Because when truth rises, it does not always feel comfortable to those who have benefited from misunderstanding it. Some may attempt to test you again, to see if the version of you they knew is still there. Some may subtly challenge your boundaries, not directly, but through tone, through behavior, through small actions that attempt to reestablish the old pattern. But this is where your awareness becomes your strength. You no longer need to react emotionally. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to engage in ways that drain your energy. Your presence alone becomes the response. Your clarity becomes the boundary. Your alignment becomes the answer. And that is what creates the true confrontation. Because it is no longer about what is said. It is about what is no longer tolerated. Archangel Michael makes it clear that truth does not always come with loud declarations. Sometimes, it comes with quiet decisions. Decisions to step back. Decisions to disengage. Decisions to no longer participate in conversations or environments that do not reflect your alignment. And those decisions speak louder than words, because they change the structure of the interaction itself. What once felt easy to others may now feel restricted. What once flowed without question may now meet resistance. And not because you are creating conflict, but because you are no longer supporting what is not aligned. This is where deception begins to reveal itself. Not always openly, but through reaction. Through the way people respond when they no longer receive the same access. Through the way they adjust when your presence no longer fits into their expectations. Through the way their behavior shifts when they realize you are no longer moving the same way. This is the exposure. And it happens naturally. Because when truth stands, everything around it must adjust. Some will adjust positively. They will recognize the shift, respect it, and align with it. Others will struggle with it. They may resist, question, or attempt to return things to how they were. But what they will all feel is the difference, and that difference cannot be undone. Because once truth hath been seen, it cannot be unseen. Once alignment hath been felt, it cannot be unfelt. And once you have stepped into this level of awareness, you cannot return to unconscious patterns. This is why this moment matters. Because this is where your growth becomes visible, not just to you but to others. This is where the internal shift begins to shape your external reality. This is where your presence begins to redefine the environment around you. And with it comes responsibility. You must remain grounded in what you now understand. You must resist the urge to fall back into old patterns simply because they are familiar. You must trust that what you are feeling is guiding you correctly, even if it creates temporary discomfort. Because this confrontation is not about conflict. It is about clarity. It is about allowing truth to take its place without interference. It is about standing in your alignment without needing to justify it. And when you do that, something powerful happens. The need for confrontation dissolves because the truth itself becomes undeniable. And in that space, everything that was built on misunderstanding begins to fall away. Not by force, but by truth. Type "I stand in truth" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 7777 is now activated. There is a truth that becomes unavoidable once you reach this level of awareness, and it is not always easy to accept. Not everyone who walked with you can continue with you. Not everyone who had access to you is meant to remain connected to you. And not every relationship that once felt natural will survive the shift that is happening within you now. This is the separation. It does not always come with loud endings or dramatic exits. It often begins quietly. A distance you cannot ignore. A lack of connection with their monstrosities. Conversations that feel forced where they once flowed naturally. You may find yourself pulling back without fully understanding why at first. You may notice that certain people no longer feel aligned with the version of you that is emerging. This is not rejection. This is refinement. Archangel Michael reveals that separation is one of the most misunderstood parts of spiritual growth. People often associate it with loss, with disconnection, with something going wrong. But in truth, it is a form of protection. It is the process of removing what no longer reflects your alignment so that what does can take its place. Because not everyone is meant to meet you at your next level. Some were only meant to know you in your earlier stages. Some were comfortable with the version of you that was still learning, still adjusting, still accommodating. But as you rise into clarity, into authority, into a deeper awareness of who you are, the dynamic changes. And not everyone will adjust with you. This is where the discomfort begins. Because part of you may still feel connected to who they were in your life. You may remember the history, the familiarity, the moments that once made the connection feel meaningful, and that can make the separation feel confusing, even painful at times. But you must understand this. You are not separating from who they were. You are separating from what no longer aligns. And those are not always the same thing. Because people can remain the same when you change. And when that happens, the connection begins to shift naturally. Not out of conflict, but out of difference. Not out of anger, but out of evolution. Archangel Michael makes it clear that this separation is not something you need to force. It is something that will reveal itself through alignment. You will begin to notice where your energy feels supported and where it feels drained. You will begin to recognize which connections still reflect your growth and which ones hold you in patterns you have outgrown. And once you see that, you cannot ignore it. Because staying connected to what no longer aligns creates resistance within you. It pulls you back into old patterns. It reintroduces dynamics that your spirit has already moved beyond. And over time, that resistance becomes heavier than the separation itself. This is why separation becomes necessary, not as punishment, not as rejection, but as preservation. Because what is being built within you now requires space. It requires clarity. It requires an environment that supports your alignment instead of challenging it constantly. And not every connection is capable of providing that. Some will fall away naturally. Communication will decrease. Interaction will become less frequent. The connection will fade without confrontation, without explanation, without the need for closure in the traditional sense. Others may require more direct boundaries. Moments where you choose not to engage, where you step back intentionally, where you redefine the level of access someone has to your life. These decisions may feel difficult at first, but they are necessary for your alignment. And then there are those who will resist the separation. They may question your change. They may try to pull you back into familiar dynamics. They may not understand why you are moving differently, why you are less available, why your energy feels different. But their confusion does not mean your alignment is wrong. It simply means they are not seeing what you now see. And that is something you must accept. Because your path is not meant to be understood by everyone. It is meant to be followed by you. This is where your strength is tested in a different way. Not through endurance, but through release. Not through holding on, but through letting go. And letting go does not always mean cutting people off completely. Sometimes it means changing the role they play in your life. Adjusting the level of access. Redefining the connection so that it no longer disrupts your alignment. This is wisdom. This is growth. This is what allows you to move forward without carrying what belongs to a previous version of yourself. Archangel Michael stands firm in this moment, reminding you that what leaves your life now is not being taken from you. It is being removed to make space for what aligns with who you are becoming. And while it may feel like loss in the moment, it is actually preparation. Preparation for connections that reflect your truth. Preparation for environments that support your growth. Preparation for a life that no longer requires you to shrink in order to maintain it. This is the purpose of separation. It clears the path. It refines your space. It ensures that what remains is aligned with where you are going, not where you have been. And once you accept this, the process becomes clearer. You stop resisting what is naturally falling away. You stop trying to hold on to what no longer fits. You begin to trust that what is leaving is making room for something greater. Because it is. Type "I release what no longer aligns" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 8888 is now activated. As this message speaks directly into your spirit, understand that what is happening right now is bigger than a single moment. It is part of a divine flow reaching hearts that are ready to awaken. Every word you receive here carries the potential to break chains, to bring clarity, to guide someone else out of confusion and into alignment. Scripture declares that when you give, it will be given back to you, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. And this is not just a promise. It is a living truth moving through you right now. I feel this deeply. I am not just listening. I am participating in what God is doing through this message. When you support through Super Thanks with a PayPal link in the description or QR code, you are sowing into a mission that spreads light into places still covered in darkness. This is not a simple act. It is a prophetic response, a moment where your obedience meets divine timing. As you give, May doors open, may clarity increase, and may blessings return to you in ways only heaven can orchestrate. Act now and become part of this divine movement. Here is a moment that follows separation, a moment that is quieter than the shifts before it, yet far more defining. It is not about what others are doing anymore. It is not about who misunderstood you, who watched you, or who fell away. This moment is about you, about what you will do with everything you have now seen, everything you now understand, and everything that has been awakened within you. This is the test of power, not power over others, but power within yourself. Because now that you are aware, now that the lion within you has awakened, now that the illusion has been broken and the separation has begun, you are standing at a threshold. On one side is the version of you that you have outgrown. On the other side is the version of you that requires you to fully step into your authority. And between those two sides is a choice. Archangel Michael reveals that this is where many people hesitate, not because they do not know the truth, but because stepping into it requires a level of consistency they have not yet fully embraced. It requires you to hold your boundaries even when it feels uncomfortable. It requires you to trust your awareness even when others question it. It requires you to move forward without needing the approval of those who were part of your past patterns. This is not easy, because the pull to retreat can be strong. You may feel moments where the familiar calls you back, moments where it seems easier to return to the version of yourself that kept everything smooth, that avoided tension, that maintained connections even when they were no longer aligned. You may feel the urge to explain yourself, to soften your stance, to make things easier for others so that you do not have to sit with the discomfort of change. But this is the test, not of your strength but of your alignment, because power is not proven in moments of clarity alone. It is proven in moments of decision, in moments where you must choose whether to stand in what you know or return to what you used to tolerate. Archangel Michael stands firm in this moment, reminding you that the power within you was not given for temporary awareness. It was given for transformation, and transformation requires action. Not loud action, not aggressive action, but consistent action that reflects your truth. This is where you begin to see the difference between knowing and embodying. You already know what no longer aligns. You already see what has been revealed. You already feel the shift within you. But now, you must live in a way that honors that awareness. You must move in a way that reflects that clarity. You must carry yourself in a way that matches the identity that has been awakened. This is where the real change happens. Because once you begin to embody your truth, everything else adjusts around it. The spaces that no longer fit will become even more apparent. The people who are not aligned will naturally distance themselves or reveal themselves more clearly. The opportunities that match your growth will begin to appear, often in ways you did not expect. But none of that happens if you retreat. And retreat does not always look obvious. It can be subtle. It can look like ignoring what you feel. It can look like re-engaging in conversations that you know are not aligned. It can look like lowering your standards just enough to maintain comfort. But even small retreats carry weight, because they pull you back into patterns that your spirit has already moved beyond. This is why this moment matters so much, because you are no longer in a place where you can move unconsciously. You are aware now, and awareness carries responsibility. It requires you to act in alignment with what you know, even when it is inconvenient, even when it creates temporary discomfort, even when it requires you to stand alone in your understanding. This is the rise, not a dramatic display, not a sudden transformation that everyone sees immediately, but a steady, consistent movement into your authority. A refusal to compromise what you now recognize. a commitment to living in a way that reflects your true identity. And as you do this, something begins to stabilize within you. The tension you once felt starts to fade. The uncertainty that once lingered begins to dissolve. The need for external validation becomes less important, because you are no longer looking outside for confirmation. You are moving from within. This is what power looks like. Not loud, not forceful, but grounded. And once you step into it fully, there is no need to prove it to anyone, because it speaks for itself. Archangel Michael reveals that this test is not meant to challenge you beyond your capacity. It is meant to confirm what has already been placed inside you. You are not being asked to become something new. You are being asked to fully be what you already are. And that requires trust. Trust in your awareness. Trust in your decisions. Trust in the shift that is guiding you forward. Because what lies ahead is not uncertain. It is aligned. But you must choose to rise into it. Not once, but consistently. And that consistency is what transforms awareness into reality. Type "I choose to rise" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 9999 is now activated. There is something you must understand about everything you have experienced up to this point. None of it has gone unnoticed. Not the silence you carried. Not the restraint you practiced. Not the moments where you chose peace over reaction, even when you had every reason to respond. And most importantly, not the way others moved around you while misunderstanding who you truly are. Heaven has seen all of it. And now, heaven is responding. This is where divine justice begins to unfold. Not in the way the world defines it, not through conflict or revenge, but through exposure. Through truth rising to the surface in ways that cannot be controlled, manipulated, or hidden any longer. Because when truth reaches its appointed time, it does not ask for permission to be revealed. It simply appears. Archangel Michael stands at the center of this moment, not as a figure of warning now, but as a witness to what is about to be set into motion. He reveals that what has been concealed in subtle ways will begin to show itself clearly. Not because you force it, not because you confront it directly, but because the alignment you have stepped into no longer supports deception. And when alignment no longer supports something, it begins to fall apart. You may start to notice this in ways that seem small at first. Inconsistencies that become obvious. Words that no longer match actions. Behavior that reveals intention without needing explanation. Situations where the truth becomes clear without anyone having to say it directly. This is how exposure works. It does not always arrive loudly. It often comes through clarity. Through moments where you see something and realize you can no longer interpret it any other way. Through situations where others reveal themselves simply by continuing to be who they have been, while you are no longer willing to ignore it. And as this happens, something else will occur. You will feel less emotional about it. What once would have triggered a reaction will now bring understanding. What once would have caused confusion will now bring certainty. Because when truth is revealed at the right time, it does not create chaos within you. It creates peace. A quiet, undeniable peace that says, "Now you see." This is divine justice. Not the need to prove anything. Not the need to defend yourself. Not the need to correct every misunderstanding. But the knowing that what is real will eventually stand on its own, without your effort. Archangel Michael makes it clear that this phase is not about confrontation. It is about confirmation. Confirmation of what you already felt. Confirmation of what your spirit has been trying to show you. Confirmation that your awareness was not misplaced, that your discernment was accurate, that what you sensed beneath the surface was real. And once that confirmation settles, something within you will shift again. You will stop questioning yourself. You will stop wondering if you were overthinking. You will stop second-guessing your perception. Because now, the evidence will align with what you already knew. This is where many people feel the urge to respond, to say something, to address what has been revealed. But Archangel Michael reminds you that not every truth requires your voice. Some truths reveal themselves so completely that your silence becomes the strongest response. Because when something is fully exposed, it no longer needs explanation and speaks for itself. And in that space, your role is not to react, but to remain aligned, to observe without becoming entangled, to understand without needing to engage, to move forward without carrying what has already been revealed. This is where your power becomes steady, because you are no longer trying to make others see what you see. You are simply moving based on what has already been shown to you. And that creates a different kind of presence, one that does not depend on agreement, one that does not require validation, one that stands in truth regardless of who acknowledges it. This is what changes everything, because as truth continues to surface, dynamics will shift naturally. Some people may try to explain themselves. Some may attempt to adjust their behavior once they realize they are no longer unseen. Others may distance themselves, recognizing that their position in your life is no longer secure. But none of that requires your control, because divine justice is not something you manage. It is something you witness. Archangel Michael reveals that what is being exposed now is not just for your clarity, but for your release, so that you can move forward without doubt, so that you can step fully into your alignment without hesitation, so that you no longer carry questions about what was real and what was not, because clarity removes hesitation, and without hesitation, you move differently. You move with certainty. You move with intention. You move with peace. This is the result of truth being revealed at the right time. And this is where you must remain grounded, not in what is being exposed, but in who you are becoming through it. Because the purpose of this revelation is not to pull you back into what has already passed. It is to push you forward into what is aligned. And once you accept that, you will understand something deeply. Nothing needed to be forced. Nothing needed to be proven. Everything is being revealed exactly as it should be. And in that, justice is already being fulfilled. Type "I trust divine justice" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1010 is now activated. There comes a moment after truth has been revealed, after separation has taken place, after the test of power has been faced, when something within you settles into a new state. It is no longer about questioning what happened. It is no longer about processing what you have seen. It is about stepping fully into who you are now, without hesitation, without apology, and without the need to look back. This is the rise of your authority, not an authority given by others, not something granted through recognition or approval, but something that has always been within you, now fully realized. It is the natural result of everything you have gone through. The awareness, the restraint, the awakening, the shift, the confrontation, the separation, the testing, and the revelation. All of it has led to this point. And now, you stand differently. You may not even notice it at first, but others will. The way you carry yourself has changed. There is a steadiness in you now that was not as visible before. A clarity that does not waver when challenged. A presence that does not shrink in unfamiliar situations. You are no longer adjusting yourself to fit into spaces that do not align. You are no longer explaining your worth to those who cannot recognize it. You simply are. This is what authority feels like. It is not loud. It is not forced. It does not demand attention. But it cannot be ignored, because it is rooted in truth. And truth, once embodied, carries a weight that does not need reinforcement. Archangel Michael reveals that this is the stage where many people finally understand why everything unfolded the way it did, why the misunderstanding was allowed, why the observation happened, why the separation became necessary. It was not to break you. It was to build you into someone who no longer needs external validation to stand in their identity. Because when your identity is internal, your authority becomes natural. You no longer seek confirmation. You no longer wait for permission. You no longer hesitate when something does not feel aligned. You move. And that movement is what defines this phase. You will begin to make decisions with a clarity that feels different. Not right and not reactive, but certain. You will choose environments that reflect your growth without needing to justify why. You will engage with people who align with your energy without questioning whether you deserve that alignment. This is the shift into embodiment. Because knowing who you are is one thing. Living as who you are is another. And now, you are doing both. This is where your voice may begin to change as well. Not in value, but in intention. When you speak, it will come from a place of clarity rather than explanation. When you remain silent, it will be from a place of choice rather than uncertainty. Everything you do will begin to reflect the alignment you have stepped into. And that alignment will create a ripple effect. People will respond to you differently. Not because you are trying to change how they see you, but because you are no longer presenting yourself in a way that allows misunderstanding. Your boundaries will be clearer. Your energy will be more defined. Your presence will naturally command a level of respect that was not fully recognized before. This is not something you need to enforce. It happens because you are no longer operating from the same space. Archangel Michael stands firm in this moment, affirming that what you are stepping into is not temporary. This is not a phase that will pass. This is a foundation that will continue to build as you move forward. And the more you trust it, the stronger it becomes. But there is something you must remain aware of. Authority requires consistency. Not perfection, but consistency. You will be presented with moments where you are tested again. Not in the same way as before, but in smaller ways. Situations where you are given the choice to either maintain your alignment or return briefly to old patterns. And in those moments, your response will determine how stable this new identity becomes. Because authority is not just claimed once. It is lived continuously. This is where discipline meets identity. Where your awareness becomes action. Where your understanding becomes behavior. And the more you align your actions with what you now know, the more natural this new state becomes. You will no longer feel like you are trying to be someone different. You will realize that you are simply being who you have always been, without the layers that once covered it. This is freedom. Freedom from needing to be understood by everyone. Freedom from needing to maintain connections that do not align. Freedom from questioning your own perception. Freedom from shrinking yourself to maintain comfort. And with that freedom comes responsibility. To protect what you have built within yourself. To honor the clarity you have received. To continue moving in alignment, even when it would be easier not to. Because what you are carrying now is not just awareness. It is authority. And authority, once fully embraced, changes everything that follows. You are no longer the same. And you are not meant to be. Type "I walk in my authority" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1111 is now activated. This is where everything comes together. Not in theory, not in reflection, but in decision. Because after everything you have seen, everything you have felt, everything that has been revealed and awakened within you, there is one truth that now stands before you with undeniable clarity. What happens next depends on you, not on what others choose, not on how they respond, not on whether they understand your shift or resist it. This moment is no longer about them. It is about you stepping fully into what has already been placed inside you and deciding, without hesitation, that you will not return to who you were before this awakening began. Archangel Michael stands in this final moment not as a messenger of warning alone, but as a witness to your transformation. He reveals that you have crossed a threshold. You are no longer in the phase of questioning, of waiting, of trying to understand what is happening around you. You have been shown enough. You have felt enough. You have seen enough. Now you must choose. Because every revelation carries responsibility. Every moment of clarity carries a decision. And every step forward requires you to leave something behind. You cannot carry old patterns into new alignment. You cannot maintain the same boundaries you once allowed and expect different outcomes. You cannot return to silence where your voice is now required. This is the final warning, not one of fear but of awareness. If you ignore what has been shown to you, if you return to what you now know is misaligned, if you choose comfort over clarity, you will feel it immediately. The same tension, the same confusion, the same internal conflict will return, not because you are meant to suffer, but because you are no longer meant to live in that space. Your spirit has outgrown it. And once your spirit outgrows something, it cannot settle there again without resistance. This is why this moment matters so deeply. Because you are no longer unaware. You are no longer asleep to what has been happening. You are no longer moving blindly through situations that once confused you. You have been awakened. An awakening changes everything. But with that awakening comes a blessing. A blessing that is not given lightly, but released in alignment with your willingness to step fully into what you now understand. Archangel Michael declares that as you continue forward in this awareness, as you honor your boundaries, as you trust your discernment, as you walk in your authority without shrinking back, something begins to open for you. Doors that once felt distant begin to align. Connections that reflect your truth begin to appear. Clarity that once felt uncertain becomes steady. Peace that once felt temporary becomes your foundation. This is not something you chase. This is something you align with. Because what is meant for you does not require you to abandon yourself to receive it. It requires you to be fully yourself. This is the blessing. Not just external changes, but internal stability. A sense of knowing that does not depend on circumstances. A presence that remains grounded regardless of what is happening around you. A life that begins to reflect the truth you now carry within you. But you must remain consistent. Because this is not a one-time decision. It is a daily alignment. A daily choice to remain aware. A daily choice to honor what you feel. A daily choice to move in truth, even when it would be easier to do otherwise. And as you do this, something powerful takes place. You no longer question your path. You no longer doubt your direction. You no longer hesitate in your decisions. Because you are no longer disconnected from yourself. This is the completion of the cycle. The moment where everything you have gone through transforms into something stable, something lasting, something that continues to guide you forward. And in this moment, Archangel Michael leaves you with one final truth. You were never weak. You were never overlooked. You were never without power. You were in preparation. And now that preparation has become activation, what you do next will determine how fully you step into it. So do not shrink back. Do not return to what you have outgrown. Do not ignore what has been revealed. Stand. Move. Continue forward with the clarity you now carry, because everything ahead of you is waiting for the version of you that has just awakened, and that version of you is ready. Type "I step fully into my power" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212 is now activated. As this final word settles into your spirit, understand this truth. What has just been spoken over you is not meant to stop here. It is meant to reach others who are still standing where you once stood, still questioning, still searching, still waiting for clarity. Every message like this is a seed, and when it is sown, it becomes light in someone else's darkness, a breakthrough in someone else's confusion. The word declares, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days," and right now, your giving becomes that living seed that multiplies across unseen lives. I feel this deeply within. I am not just receiving this message, I am becoming part of the mission that carries it forward. When you give through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description or QR code, you are not donating. You are activating a flow that allows God's voice to reach those who need it most. This is your moment to respond with intention, to step into alignment with what heaven is doing right now. As you release your seed, may favor open before you, may clarity increase within you, and may blessings return to you in ways only God can orchestrate. Act now, and take your place in this divine assignment.